Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you. The words are simple, and this story is good for beginners. I will read at a normal speed today, like people usually talk. Don't worry if you miss a word here and there. Just follow the story. The story is called 2 Weeks at the Farm. Let's start. Ben was 10 years old. He lived in a big city with his mother and father. Ben loved the city, but every summer, he did something special. Every summer, Ben went to stay with his grandparents. His grandparents lived far from the city, in a small village. They had a farm. Ben always loved his time at the farm. This summer, Ben was going to stay at the farm for 2 whole weeks. He was very excited. He packed his bag the night before. He put in shorts, t-shirts, his favorite book, and his football. His mother smiled and said, "You won't need the football there, Ben. There's too much work to do on a farm." But Ben didn't believe her. He packed the football anyway. The next morning, Ben's father drove him to the farm. The drive was long, almost 3 hours. Ben watched the city disappear behind them. Slowly, the tall buildings became houses. Then the houses became fields. Then the fields became forests and hills. Ben loved watching the world change through the car window. He counted cows in the fields to pass the time, and by the time they arrived, he had counted over 200. When they arrived, Ben's grandmother was waiting outside the farmhouse. She wore a straw hat and an apron. She had flour on her hands from baking bread. When she saw the car, she smiled a huge smile and waved. "Ben. My favorite grandson," she called. "I'm your only grandson, Grandma," Ben said, laughing, as he ran to hug her. "That makes you my favorite by default," she said, laughing too. Ben's grandfather came out from the barn. He wore old work boots and a hat. He shook Ben's hand like Ben was already a grown man, which Ben always liked. "Ready for some real work this summer?" his grandfather asked. "Yes," Ben said. He didn't know exactly what real work meant, but he was ready for anything. Ben's father said goodbye and drove back to the city. Ben watched the car until he couldn't see it anymore. Then he turned around and looked at the farm. There was the old red barn. There were the green fields. There were chickens walking near the house. There was a big brown dog named Rex, who ran straight to Ben and jumped up to say hello. "Hi, Rex," Ben said, laughing as the dog licked his face. That evening, Ben's grandmother made a big dinner. There was chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. Everything tasted better at the farm, Ben always thought. Maybe it was because his grandmother grew the vegetables herself. Maybe it was because Ben was always hungry after playing outside all day. After dinner, Ben sat outside with his grandfather and watched the sun go down behind the hills. "Tomorrow," his grandfather said, "you help me with the morning chores." 6 o'clock. "Can you wake up that early?" 6 o'clock? Ben said, surprised. In the city, he never woke up before 8. "The animals don't know about sleeping late," his grandfather said, smiling. The next morning, Ben's grandmother woke him up at 5:45. Ben was very tired, but he got dressed quickly. He didn't want to be late on his first day of work. Outside, the sky was still a little dark, but the birds were already singing loudly. His grandfather was waiting near the barn. "Good morning," he said. "First, we feed the chickens." Ben followed his grandfather to a small building where the chickens lived. His grandfather showed him how to give the chickens their food and fresh water. The chickens made loud noises and ran around Ben's feet. Ben laughed. "There are so many of them," Ben said. 22 chickens, his grandfather said. "And they give us eggs every day. Come, I'll show you how to collect the eggs." Ben learned how to carefully take the eggs from the small boxes where the chickens laid them. Some eggs were still warm. Ben put them gently into a basket. It felt like a small, exciting job. After the chickens, they went to see the cows. There were 6 cows on the farm. Ben's grandfather milked two of them while Ben watched carefully. "Do you want to try?" his grandfather asked. Ben tried, but it was harder than it looked. His grandfather laughed kindly and showed him again, slowly. By the end of the morning, Ben could do it a little better, though not as well as his grandfather, who had done this job for over 50 years. After the chores, Ben and his grandfather went back to the house for breakfast. Ben was hungry and tired, but happy. His grandmother made eggs, using the ones Ben had collected that morning, with fresh bread and butter. "These eggs are the best I've ever eaten," Ben said proudly. "That's because you collected them yourself," his grandmother said, smiling. After breakfast, Ben had some free time. He walked around the farm with Rex the dog. He found a field full of sunflowers, taller than Ben himself. He found a small river at the edge of the farm, with cold, clear water. He sat by the river for a while, throwing small stones into the water, listening to the sound of birds and insects around him. It was very different from the city, where he always heard cars and people. That afternoon, a girl walked over to the farm. She looked to be about Ben's age. She had short hair and was wearing rubber boots covered in mud. "Hi," she said. "I'm Zoe. I live on the next farm. Are you Ben? Your grandmother told my mother you were coming to visit." "Yes, that's me," Ben said, feeling a little shy. He didn't know many kids outside of the city. "Do you want to see something cool?" Zoe asked. "There's a tree near my house with a rope swing. It goes right over the river." Ben looked at his grandfather, who nodded and said, "Go on, have fun. Just be back before dinner." Ben and Zoe walked together to the rope swing. Zoe showed Ben how to hold the rope and swing far out over the water. At first, Ben was a little scared, but Zoe went first, laughing loudly and swinging high into the air before dropping into the water below. Ben decided to try too. He held the rope tightly and swung out over the river. For a moment, he felt like he was flying. Then he let go and fell into the cool water with a big splash. "That was amazing," Ben shouted, coming up out of the water, laughing. "I told you it was cool," Zoe said, grinning. They swam and swung on the rope for almost 2 hours, until the sun started to go down. Ben walked home wet, tired, and happier than he had felt in a long time. The next morning, Ben woke up again at 5:45, this time without much trouble, since his body already felt a little used to the early hours. Today, his grandfather showed him a new job, feeding the pigs. There were 4 pigs on the farm, living in a muddy area behind the barn. Ben thought they were funny animals, always pushing each other to get to the food first, making loud grunting noises. "Pigs are actually very smart," his grandfather told him, pouring food into a long trough. "Smarter than dogs, some people say." "Really?" Ben said, looking at the pigs with new respect, even though one of them was currently trying to eat Ben's shoe. After the pigs, they visited the sheep, which lived in a large field a short walk from the barn. There were almost 30 sheep, all eating grass calmly. Ben's grandfather pointed to one sheep standing a little apart from the others, near a small wooden shelter. "That one had a baby 3 days ago," his grandfather said. "A little lamb. Would you like to see it?" Ben nodded eagerly, and they walked closer. Inside the small shelter, a tiny lamb lay next to its mother, white and soft, with long, thin legs that looked too big for its small body. The lamb looked up at Ben with big, curious eyes. "She's beautiful," Ben whispered, not wanting to scare it. "Actually, this little lamb is a bit weak," his grandfather said, his voice more serious now. "She's not drinking enough milk from her mother. We might need to help feed her with a bottle, a few times a day, until she gets stronger. Would you like to help with that job? It's an important one." "Yes, definitely," Ben said, feeling proud that his grandfather trusted him with something so important. That afternoon, Ben's grandfather showed him how to prepare a special bottle of warm milk for the lamb. Ben sat carefully in the straw, holding the bottle while the small lamb drank hungrily, its little tail wagging quickly the whole time. Ben decided to name her Daisy, because of a small white flower shape on her forehead. "Hello," Daisy, Ben said softly. You're going to get big and strong, I promise. Over the next few days, feeding Daisy became one of Ben's favorite jobs. Every morning and every evening, he sat with her in the straw, giving her the warm milk, watching her slowly become a little stronger each day. His grandfather said Ben had a good hand with animals, which made Ben feel very proud. Zoe came over most afternoons, and together they explored more of the farm and the countryside around it. One afternoon, Zoe suggested they go fishing at the river with her father's old fishing rods. Have you ever been fishing? Zoe asked. Never, Ben admitted. There aren't many rivers in the city. Zoe's father showed them both how to put the small hooks and bait onto the fishing lines, and how to throw the line gently into the water without scaring the fish away. They sat quietly by the river for almost an hour, waiting patiently. Ben started to think fishing was a little boring, until suddenly his fishing rod bent sharply, and something pulled hard on the line. I think I caught something. Ben shouted excitedly. Pull it in slowly, Zoe said, just as excited. After a small struggle, Ben pulled a shining silver fish out of the water, about the size of his hand. He held it up proudly, water dripping everywhere, while Zoe laughed and took a photo with her phone to show her father later. My first fish, Ben said. I have to tell Grandma. Maybe she can cook it for dinner. That evening, Ben's grandmother did cook the small fish, along with a much bigger dinner, since one small fish wasn't quite enough to feed everyone. But Ben proudly ate his small piece first, telling everyone at the table the whole story of how he caught it, adding a little more excitement to the story each time he told it. One warm evening, near the end of the first week, Zoe's mother suggested that Ben and Zoe could camp outside for the night, in a small tent in the field behind Zoe's house. Ben had never camped outside before, and he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Is it safe? Ben asked his grandmother. Completely safe, she said, smiling. You'll love it. When I was young, we used to camp outside almost every summer. That evening, Ben and Zoe set up a small tent together, with some help from Zoe's father. They brought sleeping bags, a small flashlight, and a bag of snacks. As the sun went down, they sat outside the tent, eating marshmallows cooked over a small fire, watching the sky slowly fill with stars. In the city, you can't really see stars like this, Ben said, looking up in wonder. There's too much light from all the buildings. Really? That sounds strange, Zoe said. I can't imagine a sky without stars. They lay back on a blanket, looking up at the huge, dark sky covered in thousands of tiny lights. Zoe pointed out a few shapes she knew, telling Ben simple stories her grandmother had taught her about the stars and the shapes they made. They talked quietly for a long time about school, about their families, about what they wanted to do when they grew up. Ben said he wanted to be a scientist. Zoe said she wanted to be a vet, so she could take care of animals like Daisy the lamb every day. Eventually, they crawled into their sleeping bags inside the tent, listening to the quiet sounds of the countryside at night, crickets singing, an owl calling somewhere in the distance. Ben fell asleep feeling more peaceful than he ever felt in his noisy city bedroom. The next morning, they woke up early, a little cold but happy, and walked back to Zoe's house for a big breakfast made by Zoe's mother, full of pancakes and fresh fruit from the garden. One morning, about a week into his stay, the sky looked strange. Dark clouds gathered quickly over the hills. Ben's grandfather looked worried. A storm is coming, he said. A big one, I think. We need to bring the animals inside quickly, and check that everything is secure. Ben helped his grandfather move the chickens into a safer, covered area. They checked the barn doors. They moved farm equipment inside, out of the wind. Zoe came running over to help too, since storms could be dangerous for animals if people weren't careful. Ben made sure Daisy the lamb and her mother were safely inside the shelter before the rain started. The wind grew stronger. The sky grew darker. Then the rain started, heavy and loud, hitting the roof of the barn like thousands of small stones. Thunder cracked loudly across the sky, and Ben jumped a little each time. Are you scared? Zoe asked, noticing. A little, Ben admitted. We don't get storms like this in the city, not really. The buildings are too tall, I think. You can't really see the sky. It's okay to be a little scared, Zoe said. I used to be scared too, when I was younger. Now I think it's actually kind of exciting, watching the storm from somewhere safe and dry. They stood together in the barn doorway, watching the rain fall heavily across the fields, the animals safe and dry around them. Slowly, Ben started to feel less afraid, and more amazed by how powerful and beautiful the storm looked, with lightning lighting up the whole sky for a brief second at a time. The storm lasted almost 2 hours. When it finally stopped, everything outside looked fresh and clean. The air smelled different, cool and a little sweet. Ben's grandfather checked the fields and the animals carefully. Everything is okay, he said, relieved. No damage, mostly. Though it looks like part of the fence near the sheep field came down. We'll need to fix that tomorrow. The next morning, fixing the fence became the day's main job. Ben's grandfather showed him how to hold the wooden posts steady while he hammered them back into the ground. It was hard, tiring work, and Ben's arms felt sore by lunchtime, but he felt proud watching the fence slowly become strong and straight again. Good work today, his grandfather said, patting Ben on the shoulder. A real farm helper now. That evening, Ben's grandmother made hot chocolate for everyone, including Zoe, who stayed for dinner again. They sat together near the fireplace, warm and dry, listening to the last of the rain falling gently outside, talking about the storm and everything they had fixed together that day. One afternoon that week, Ben's grandmother decided it was time to teach Ben how to bake bread, something she had done every week for over 40 years. She showed him how to mix the flour, water, salt, and yeast together, and how to knead the dough with both hands until it became smooth and soft. You have to be patient with bread, she told him. You can't rush it. It needs time to rise, just like anything good in life. Ben pushed and folded the dough for almost 10 minutes, his arms getting tired, flour covering his shirt and even a little on his face, which made his grandmother laugh. They left the dough to rise near the warm oven for an hour, and Ben used the time to check on Daisy and feed her another bottle of milk. When the bread finally came out of the oven, golden brown and smelling wonderful, Ben felt incredibly proud. He cut the first slice himself and ate it warm, with butter melting on top. This is the best bread I've ever made, Ben said. It's the only bread you've ever made, his grandmother said, smiling, but yes, it's very good. Later that week, Ben's grandfather needed to take some vegetables to sell at the small village market, which happened every Wednesday morning in the center of the village. Ben asked if he could come along and help. They loaded the truck early in the morning with baskets of tomatoes, potatoes, carrots, and fresh eggs. The market was already busy when they arrived, with several other farmers setting up their own small stalls, selling cheese, honey, flowers, and homemade jam. Ben helped his grandfather arrange the vegetables neatly on their table. Throughout the morning, villagers came to buy their vegetables, and Ben's grandfather introduced Ben to almost everyone who stopped by. This is my grandson, visiting from the city, he said proudly, again and again. Ben even helped a little with selling, carefully counting change for customers, something he found more difficult than expected, but his grandfather patiently helped him each time he made a small mistake. By the end of the morning, almost everything was sold, and Ben's grandfather bought him a warm pastry from a nearby stall as a reward for his hard work. You're a good businessman, his grandfather said. Maybe you'll run this farm yourself one day. Ben smiled at the idea, though he wasn't sure yet what he wanted to do when he grew up. Maybe a scientist, like he told Zoe. Or maybe, he thought, something involving animals and farms, after everything he had learned this summer. One afternoon, Zoe suggested they ride their bicycles into the nearby town, about 30 minutes away, where there was a small shop that sold the best ice cream in the whole area, according to Zoe. Are we allowed? Ben asked. Of course, if we tell our parents where we're going, Zoe said. I do it all the time. They told Ben's grandmother, who packed them a small snack just in case, and they rode their bikes along a quiet country road, past fields and farms, until they reached the small town. The town had narrow streets, a small church, and a few shops. They found the ice cream shop easily, since a small line of people stood outside it. Ben chose chocolate and strawberry, while Zoe chose something called farmhouse vanilla, made with milk from a nearby farm. They sat outside on a bench, eating their ice cream slowly, watching people walk by in the small town square. "This is definitely the best ice cream I've ever had," Ben said. "Told you," Zoe said, grinning proudly, as if she had made it herself. Before riding home, they walked around the small town a little more, and Ben bought a postcard from a small shop to send to his parents back in the city. On the back, he wrote a short message, "Having the best summer ever. Learn to milk a cow, feed a lamb, and catch a fish. Miss you both, but not too much. Love, Ben." The second week of Ben's visit was even busier than the first. It was harvest time on the farm. This meant it was time to collect the vegetables and fruit that had been growing all summer. Ben's grandfather showed him how to pick apples carefully from the trees without damaging them. He showed him how to dig up potatoes from the ground, which Ben thought was strangely fun, like a small treasure hunt. Zoe's family helped too, and Ben's family helped Zoe's family the next day, since farms in the village always helped each other during harvest time. Ben learned that this was an old tradition. Farmers worked together, moving from one farm to another until everyone's harvest was finished. "Many hands make light work," Ben's grandmother said, watching everyone working together happily in the fields. Ben didn't fully understand this saying at first, but by the end of the week, after helping harvest not just his grandparents' farm but also Zoe's family's farm and one more neighbor's farm, he understood it perfectly. Work that seemed impossible for one person alone became easy, even fun, when many people worked together. By this time, Daisy the lamb had grown noticeably stronger. She could run and jump around the field now, following Ben whenever he visited, almost like a small dog. Ben's grandfather said Daisy probably thought Ben was her second mother, which made Ben laugh, though he felt very proud too. "You did a great job with her," his grandfather said. "She might not have made it without your help every day." Ben felt a warm, happy feeling in his chest hearing that. He had never taken care of anything as important as a living animal before, and it made him feel grown up in a new way. On Ben's last Saturday at the farm, the whole village had a special event called the Summer Harvest Fair. It happened every year, at the end of the harvest season, in a big field near the village center. Farmers brought their best vegetables and fruit to show. There were games for children. There was music, played by a small group of local musicians. There was food everywhere, fresh bread, cheese, and pies made from the fruit collected that week. Ben and Zoe entered a competition together, a race where you had to carry an egg on a spoon without dropping it. They practiced for almost an hour beforehand, laughing every time the egg fell into the grass. During the real race, Zoe dropped her egg almost immediately, but Ben managed to finish in third place, winning a small ribbon that he proudly showed to his grandparents. "My first farm competition," Ben said happily. "I have to frame this ribbon when I go home." There was also a competition to guess the weight of the biggest pumpkin grown that year, and a tug-of-war game between different village families, which Ben's team lost badly but laughed about the whole time. Zoe's little brother, only 6 years old, won a prize for the best drawing of a farm animal, choosing to draw Daisy the lamb after Ben told him all about her. Later in the afternoon, Ben's grandfather entered his prize tomatoes into the vegetable competition. He had grown especially large, red tomatoes that summer, and Ben had helped water them almost every morning during his visit. When the judges announced the winners, Ben's grandfather won second place, and he told everyone proudly that his grandson had helped grow them. "I think next year, you'll help me win first place," his grandfather said, smiling at Ben. "Maybe," Ben said. "But only if you let me use the football sometimes too." His grandfather laughed loudly. "Deal," he said. That evening, everyone from the village gathered together as the sun went down, eating dinner outside together at long wooden tables, children running around playing games, adults talking and laughing together. Ben sat between his grandparents and Zoe, feeling full, tired, and completely happy. He thought about how different this felt from his normal life in the city, where he rarely saw his neighbors, let alone shared dinner with the whole street. Near the end of the evening, the local musicians started playing lively music, and many villagers began to dance together in the middle of the field. Ben's grandmother pulled him up to dance too, laughing at how confused he looked trying to follow the simple steps. Zoe joined them, and soon the three of them were dancing together, badly but happily, under the string lights hung between the trees. The next morning was Ben's last day at the farm. He woke up early, without anyone waking him this time, and helped his grandfather with the morning chores one final time, feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs, this time without needing any help at all. He visited Daisy one last time too, sitting with her quietly in the straw for almost 20 minutes, scratching gently behind her ears. "Be good, Daisy," he whispered. "I'll see you next summer." Zoe came over early too, to say goodbye. "Will you come back next summer?" she asked. "Definitely," Ben said. "I already can't wait." "Good," Zoe said. "Next time I'll teach you how to milk a cow properly." "You're still pretty bad at it." Ben laughed. "Deal," he said, using his grandfather's favorite word. Zoe gave him a small drawing she had made, a picture of the two of them on the rope swing over the river, with Rex the dog running beside them. "So you don't forget us," she said, a little shyly. "I could never forget this summer," Ben said, carefully folding the drawing to keep it safe in his bag. When Ben's father arrived to drive him home, Ben hugged his grandparents tightly. "Thank you for everything," he said. "This was the best summer ever." "Come back anytime," his grandmother said, holding back a few tears. "The farm always needs a good helper like you." His grandfather shook his hand again, like the very first day, but this time he pulled Ben into a hug too. "You've become a real farm boy this summer," he said. "I'm proud of you." As the car drove away, Ben watched the farm slowly disappear behind him, just like the city had disappeared 2 weeks earlier. He held a small jar of honey his grandmother had given him, made by bees from their own farm, the small ribbon from the egg race, Zoe's drawing, and his football, still completely unused in his bag. He smiled, thinking about the storm, the rope swing, Daisy the lamb, the market, the camping trip, the harvest, the fair, and his new friend Zoe. He already couldn't wait for next summer, and he already started planning, in his head, all the things he wanted to do differently, and all the things he wanted to do again exactly the same. And that's the end of today's story, 2 weeks at the farm. I hope you enjoyed it. I think this story shows something nice. Sometimes, the best experiences happen when we try new things, and spend time with family, away from our normal, busy lives. Before you go, think about this: have you ever visited a farm or spent time somewhere very different from your usual home? What did you learn there? Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.